You know, the governor who was here opened this training, Professor Kivuda Kibwana. Kivuda Kibwana's county is actually taken by us to be a model county of for public participation, because the citizens have been empowered, and their processes are bottom up. You know, a lot of their processes, and the school is actually documenting it as a model of what we think would be an acceptable model of public participation. Yes, Karibu.
Thank you. Yeah, in Makueni we have a model of public participation. Of course, we wouldn't say, as you asked, we do not have the parameters to determine is it sufficient or not. But according to us, it is sufficient. Because what we've done, after establishing the administrative structures, that is from the county, the sub-counties, the wards, then we have the villages, which we call the sub-wards. And we have committees up to the village level. So anytime there is an issue, including the budget, the starting point is the village level, where the people at the grassroots say this is what we want done for us this year. Then that cascades upwards from the village to the sub-ward, to the ward, to the county level. And that is how business is transacted there, at every level. Nothing happens without going through those structures. So at any given time, the information available at the county headquarters can still be traced to the sub-wards, because it is a collection of what happens at the grassroots. Of course, there is the challenge of not having a legal framework, but that is what our governor came up with, so that at least we can demonstrate to the world that we conduct public participation, including for the current process of the BBI and all those things. Everything is subjected to those forums in the village, whether it is a law being passed in the county assembly, whether it is budget, anything that affects the people's lives, somehow it can be traced to having come all the way from the grassroots. That is what we are operating with, and so far so good, because at least nobody can feign ignorance. We publicize a lot through local media, through national media, press, and everything, all forums. And so far so good. The World Bank rated us very, 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 very well. They said our model is a good one. We have had also several other counties visiting for benchmarking. So we think we can contribute significantly, even when, for example, the national government now is trying to spearhead a law or at least a framework. So Makueni, we consider ourselves to be doing a good thing. Thank you.
Remember, we can share with the delegates. The Kenya government, the Ministry for Devolution, has actually guidelines for public participation and a curriculum for civic engagement. So, Julie, among the items we shall give the delegates, we shall share with them a copy of our public participation guidelines, because it's a public document. It's supposed to be on their website, but if they don't, I have one on the flash disk. I'll pass it over to you so that we can share. I was in the team that was involved in the development of those guidelines. You hear the story of Makueni. For Kenya, the devolution structure is you come from a county, you go to the sub-county, then from the sub-county, you go to the ward, then from the ward, you go to the village. The village is supposed to have a village council. So any issues of public policy, the interrogation begins at the village level. I don't know whether you people in Makueni have the village council, because Kakamega has the village council. And what they have done, they look for persons like myself who have retired and have knowledge. So they have specializations, people who came from the health sector, finance. You chair those sectors at the council level. And when these issues come, it is you who is now responsible at the village council level to educate the villagers in vernacular, in the local dialect. So people understand those things in their own language. Once they have now been told, they then can answer, they can interrogate. That's what it's supposed to, how that structure is supposed to work. So in a lot of counties, because the structures have not been taken to the lowest, there is still a challenge in engaging the citizens because the law defines the structures we're supposed to use. But where they exist, it is actually working. Any other views or reactions to yesterday's presentation by our presenter, Dr. Mwenda? You're all happy? We're going to sit, we do summaries of what we did yesterday. We do summaries of our presentations. That is what is what this thing is all about, strengthening public sector performance. You give a summary of what would be the issue and things to take home from here. Then they will react and we shall come to evaluation and go away.
That's right now, right?
Yes, we'll go do that now. Now, the summary of what we have said this morning is about Dr. Mwenda telling us yesterday about the guidelines for public participation. And just the same question that is coming up here is the issue of the adequacy of public participation. So for you, your summary will be very easy because it's ongoing. We shall give you a microphone. Then how do we sufficiently empower rural communities to participate? That is what somebody said they picked from yesterday's participation. Our colleague delegate from Zambia talks about enabling participation and demonstrate how they do it. Those of you who are from the former local authorities in Kenya, we used to have LATIF and how we used to prioritize projects. In 1982 in Kenya, the rural focus strategy for rural development that was spearheaded by the late Simon Nyachae, the Green Book, also had that practice. Communities start to identify what projects they required in a particular area, then they were required to prioritize them. The actually was voting. So you ranked the priorities. We still do the same in Kenya today when we are developing what is called the County Integrated Development Plan, CIDPs. That is the same process we still use. That's what our colleague from Zambia has talked about. And then he says who determines, who participates. It can be very limiting because like in Kenya, people are saying, you have had BBI. When were people told to call for these meetings for BBI? Who announced? Who was invited? Why did we all know? So it can also be limited depending on how the meetings are convened. Then somebody is also saying here the need for a framework. That you have, normally when people come to such meetings, there will be the tendency to suppress views. Because it's a very technical area, you can use jargon to scare people off and tell them, when I was at the Harvard University, and villagers who have never been to Harvard then get scared and say, now, in this case, he might ask me questions beyond my comprehension level. So the people who come for public participation can also be scared by the persons presiding over the sessions, depending on how they are handled. And therefore, you are saying from yesterday's thing that the need for structured engagement, but the question is, when is it sufficient? This morning, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at your program, if you look at the program on Friday, 9 to 10 a.m., it's supposed to be a 1-hour session. It is supposed to be strengthening public financial sector performance. We do not have slides we are giving to you. what we have is actually supposed to be a recap of the whole of this. You know, the whole thing. And what each one of us is supposed to be saying is, for you delegates and for the rapporteurs, as delegates prepare to go, what is it that is the take home? Because this program, this training program, is supposed to be actually part of the contribution towards strengthening public financial management reforms in Africa. So what we highlight as take home then becomes a summary of what we have been going through. My friend Andrew Rory is still out. He began as of on public financial management on Monday from 10:30 to 12:30 after our opening ceremony. He gave us an overview of public finance management framework and the reporting systems, and cited a number of the reforms across Africa. Is that Andrew? Can you give him a clap? You know, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, the director of this place, there is a retreat for directors of the Kenya School of Government campuses in the campus of the way to Tanzania in Matuga. That's why I sneaked to yesterday. We were supposed to be looking at the strategy for the school in the next 3 years. So I was making a proposal for what is it that we need to do for counties in terms of capacity development. So the director, Dr. Wanyama, is there. The acting director, therefore, is Andrew Rory, the gentleman you see over there. Andrew, I had reported that we've done the recap, that what we are doing is a summary of our various sessions, the sessions we had from Monday. So Andrew is the one who handled public financial management, where you had highlight of PFM framework and reporting systems, PFM reforms in Africa. He will also summarize fiscal strategy and microeconomic framework that was done by Kipiagon. Then Patrick works with me, and he defines a leader as somebody who raises his head and looks up. If you look up, that is a leadership. If you are standing and you look next to your body, you are managing. That is how he distinguishes leadership and management. You stand up, look forward, is leadership. You stand up and look towards your body, you are managing. That is Kashagwa. Kashagwa and I share neighboring offices at the Kenya School of Government in Nairobi at the Habel Nyamu Center. He has a lot of interest in leadership and ethical leadership practices, value-driven leadership. He will give us a summary of what he talked about. Then I'll give a summary of public investment management. Andrew Mondi is not here. We need to raise issues about procurement. We shall all contribute towards a digital transformation. Then we have audit compliance. Andrew is here. So Andrew, you may want to give a summary of all you did, plus Kibiagon's. When you have that summary, then Patrick will give his summary. Dr. Mwenda will give his summary. I'll give a summary. We can have reactions, and we shall have concluded this session. If the numbers of persons in hospitals imeenda juu, so this thing is real. Hata baba ako nayo. Si baba amepatikana? Baba ako nayo. Lakini amesema hiyo gonjwa inaenda kesho. Haitakuwa na exit sana.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I know I have been well introduced by my colleague, Mr. Angote, and the last few days we have been together, and even yesterday when it was quite interesting, when we could see each other's other side out of class. I think it was quite interesting, and as we summarize, I just want to say something very short. This is not supposed to be more or less, a lecture, but something that will raise a discussion or as we continue to summarize what we are discussing today. And the issue that we are supposed to go home with, or the challenge that we are taking home, is how do we strengthen public financial management? How do we strengthen public financial management is the critical issue that we must look at as we take home. You find that it is very, very important that we critically look at public financial management. Public financial management is very, very critical for any government, and it is critical for basic economic governance and essential in establishing performance and accountability in public institutions. So when we talk about economic governance, like in Kenya, like many other countries, you find that we are talking of socio-economic problems. And one of the things that has always been mentioned is unemployment in Africa. Unemployment in Kenya, unemployment in Ethiopia, unemployment in Tanzania, Uganda, Ghana, everywhere. Every country is complaining about unemployment. But if we don't engage economic governance, some of these problems may not be solved. And one of the best strategies to govern our economies or to bring down some of these problems is to effectively govern our economies. Because if we govern our economies become vibrant, and this vibrancy is what creates employment. But we cannot create employment from nowhere. Employment cannot come from nowhere. It will come from a vibrant economy. And it is this economy that will be able to sustain jobs. It is this economy that will be able to sustain the country. And therefore, public financial management being a very important tool, critical for economic governance, then it must be given the importance it deserves, because it is critical for establishing performance. Performance of our economy, performance of our institutions. If public sector institutions are performing well, then even various sectors of our economy will be performing well. And that is why it is important to look at the effectiveness in the administration of funds collected and dispensed by government. If we don't take due consideration of that, then we might find ourselves in a lot of problems. We might find ourselves in a vicious circle where government is collecting money, it is spending all money, in fact, even left with the deficit, and then not knowing how to fill those deficits. And that is why once in a while you'll find countries, as I mentioned on Tuesday, we find ourselves in the debt crisis. When we don't take due consideration of the governance of our economy, then we find ourselves in sometimes in the debt crisis. So, as we had indicated earlier, that public financial management is a set of laws, systems, and processes used by governments to mobilize resources Therefore, this is where we need to seek efficiency. This is where we need to seek effectiveness, so that we can have a robust public financial system that will enable us to mobilize resources. If we don't have a robust financial management system, public financial management system, then we will also not have a sustainable system of mobilizing resources, because resources must be mobilized either from tax revenue, resources might be mobilized either from debt, whether it is internal debt or external debt, and this debt must be well managed and put into the right place. Then the issue of allocation of funds. How are funds allocated? How are funds allocated? It's very, very important, because if we allocate funds to the wrong places, then they might not address our challenges, our socioeconomic challenges. And public financial management, a robust public financial management system enables us to put funds in the right use. Then also undertaking spending. In Kenya, as perhaps I'll ask Mr. Rory to also mention, is the use of the integrated financial management system that enables us to monitor how funds are being spent. So if we have systems that can be able to, to trace every coin that has been spent, every public coin that has been spent, then we may be able to solve some of the socio-economic problems that are facing. And then holding officers in public service to account. If we don't hold them to account, then it becomes very, very difficult even to trace the funds that have been allocated for public expenditure. And lastly, I'll just summarize with the objectives of strengthening public financial management. And one of the critical ones is that of enhancing capacity for resource mobilization. You find that it is through public financial management that we are able to mobilize resources. And therefore, a robust public financial management system enables or improves or enhances our capacity for resource mobilization. The other one is evidence-based budgets. Public financial budgeting is part and parcel of public financial management. And if we have a good public financial management, then even when it comes to budgets, even when we are coming to estimates, our estimates will not be so far off, because an effective public financial management enables us to have a lot of evidence which we can use for budgeting and which we can use for estimates on how public finances will be spent. Then the issue of ensuring a value for money, that is very, very critical. Every coin must be used for the right purpose, and also preventing leakages. I think one of the days, I can't remember which day, there was a very hot debate on corruption, how public funds leak, and they don't reach the intended purposes. Sometimes even when we are doing our budgeting, we even budget for those leakages, so that if we are allocating funds, we always know. Some of us or some of the countries are so sure that it is only 70% of the funds that will go to the right, will go to the right use, and 30% will be leakages. either leakages to inefficiencies, leakages to corruption, leakages that come in the process of utilization of those funds. And it is very, very important that this is avoided. So a robust public financial management system enables us to reduce these leakages to a bare minimum. And then also avoiding duplication. Sometimes when government is established, establishing of government institutions sometimes, not sometimes, is always a political process. And especially when we want to enlarge employment in the public service, to create more jobs in the public sector, sometimes there can be a lot of duplication. And I would want to give an example. Before devolution, I can see Mr. Angote, who is so passionate about devolution, has mentioned a lot on what has been happening. But before devolution, those of us perhaps who are in Kenya may have visited what used to be the headquarters of the City Council of Nairobi. It is City Hall. Up to now, I think it is still City Hall. If you wanted to get a license from City Hall, if you are to go to get a license from City Hall, what would happen is you'd make several queues. You know, there was a lot of inefficiency and a lot of duplication of work. So you'd go to queue number 1. You queue there for about 20, 30 minutes, right? 20, 30 minutes. And then all what you'll be asked is, what is your name? And then you'll be given a document. Then you are told, go to the next queue. Then you do another queue. Another 30 minutes. Then somebody asks you, give me your ID, right? Then you give the ID, and then you are told, go to the next queue. Then you do another 20, 30 minutes. Then you are given back a form, the form that you filled your name, and then the ID. Then you are told, go to the next queue, right? And queuing or long queues were evident in literally every public office. In fact, even in our revenue authority, to file tax returns was a big problem. Queues were very long. And one of the things that we need to understand, and this has to be solved through a robust public financial management system, we need to understand that whenever you see long queues, anywhere you see a long queue is a sign of inefficiency. You know, initially we were saying we have many customers in our offices coming to our offices. We have many clients. But anytime when we see long queues, it is a sign of inefficiency. And that is why I was requesting if Mr. Rory can be able to say something about automation of our financial system, because it sorts out so many of those things, and we are unable to see those long queues as we used to see them in the past. And this is as a result of a lot of duplication. And effectiveness and efficiency of a public financial management system cannot be achieved when there is a lot of leakage, a lot of duplication. And lastly, I would want to say that to ensure efficiency in the delivery of service, sorry for that typographical error, is very, very important. Ensuring efficiency in service delivery. And Mr. Angote again has mentioned Governor Professor Kifuda Kibwana, who opened this function. And this is somebody I have tried to study and see what happens, because in our devolution system, he is seen to be one of the persons who have been doing very well as far as service delivery is concerned, and his leadership is admired. What I discovered about him, because it is about leadership, is that rather than him as a leader going up, going up there and trying to pull the citizens, right? Mr. Angote was talking about public participation. Most of the times leaders would go up there and then try to pull up the citizens or those they lead. But for him, what I have realized is that he goes to where the people are and then moves up with them. And that is what perhaps have created the success that he has achieved as a governor of Makueni County. So, leadership is critical. Leadership, therefore, is very, very critical for an effective public financial management. If there is good governance, then the effectiveness and efficiency of public financial management is ensured, and therefore we are likely, with good governance, with good leadership, we are likely to have a sustainable public financial management. And even when we have to use public participation, Mr. Angote, as you have mentioned, it is also important to build the capacity of those who we are engaging in that public participation. Because if they are incapacitated, they may not know their rights, they may not know what is required, and therefore they may not be able to participate as they should. Lastly, yesterday I was in where Mr. Angote was, in the other campus, where we have the other meeting. And there is something that I read. I entered the library and I read something, and this has a lot to do with a conflict of interest. That is where those of us in public financial management find ourselves in ethical dilemmas. To do what is right, and sometimes to do what is the most right and the least wrong. Sometimes we find ourselves in those dilemmas. What do we do? So even as I summarize, I would want to say ourselves as people in charge or officers in charge, or in one way or the other, interacting with the public financial management systems in our countries, then we must build our capacity to interact with public financial management, and this will reduce even where the chances that those ethical dilemmas may affect us either negatively, or we find ourselves in a situation where we cannot be able to make a decision. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say that that would be the summary of my discussion with you. God bless you so much as we continue to engage. Back to Mr. Angote.
A clap for Pastor Patrick Kashakwa. And to allow Dr. Mwenda or yourself? Fine. He makes a summary, then you do the same. Then, you see, my work is to enjoy. I'm enjoying what these gentlemen are doing. When you have left service, this is what you want to see. Leaders do not have to dominate people. Let the people determine their own fate, but show them the future. Patrick, thank you so much. Now, in the old public services, this would be my friend today, because he could guarantee that I get a lot of tenders here to supply foodstuffs here for 2 years. Rory, since we have been friends, and even his boss, when he was still the administrative secretary in Embu, they were my friends. Now that I'm on this other side, Rory, can't I benefit? Confirm that I can benefit. Let's invite, Andrew is going to try and give a summary of those, the week's work. Then we shall invite Dr. Mwenda. And I'll make a statement, then we shall call upon Julie and company for evaluation. And of course, there will be a graduation ceremony in which we have an award of certificates.
Okay.
As evidence of participation. Not attendance. Ours is a certificate of is participation. You know, to be in attendance, you can just be sitting here, but the evidence that you participated in the deliberations.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Ngote. You can say the elder. You will get the procurement subject to the conditions which have been set. So if you meet the conditions, then you are awarded. But remember, you are an employee of the school. You are not allowed to supply to your entity. So I don't know how you're going to go around it. So I think you will get good advice from the plenary. But don't go through the proxy. It's also dangerous to do that. Good morning. Yeah, I would take about 10 minutes to summarize, and I will be a bit fast. If I'm fast, then you raise the issues. Entrenching sound public finance management practices. I want to start from a wider setting, and which means that we appreciate what we have been doing here for the last 5 days. Sorry, the colors have, maybe you are able to read, but sorry for that. I think maybe I could have changed the background. Would that make sense? It's bad even. Let me just go through because you'll get all these notes. So the first part I'm looking at is that as we speak, we have gone through a number of discussions, and I will pick up maybe from the discussion of Gashawa and where he was, that the global financial crisis and the subsequent sovereign debt crisis have brought to the light the lack of what? Transparency in public finances and poor public finance management. The discussions you had about resource mobilization, which is very key in the provision of services, has demonstrated that we are not able to raise resources necessary to support the various government functions. And what has happened is we have been able to bridge the gap through the element of debt. While debt is not bad, the question has been, do we need it, and how do we manage it, and do we have the capacity to pay? Those are questions all of us have been talking about. Again, there's growing recognition of the importance of linking policy to plan and budget. This is part of the decisions and the discussions you had with Kipyegon in terms of fiscal strategy. And you are looking at realizing the sustainable development goals through a proper linkage of the policy. The SDG itself is a policy which we have adopted. There are quite a number of declarations we have adopted to. Some organizations have done very well. Those in the agriculture sector remember the so-called Maputo Declaration. What was it about? 10% of our budget to be put in which sector? In agriculture. Malawi is one of the countries which put the resources into agriculture, and they turned the country from food deficiency to a food surplus. So is there a linkage of the policies we make and the budgets we do and what actually actions we take? We have been talking about the Abuja Declaration, which requires that we have what? 15% of our budget in health. What is the budget in health in our countries? I think there is a concern. So is that policy speaking? Agenda 2063, 50 years of planning for Africa to be an investment destination. Have we done enough to make it an investment destination? those are questions we need to check. That linkage of policy to plan to budget, does it work? Unfortunately, somebody was telling me in Africa sometimes we work in the reverse, budget, plan, policy. That's also interesting. It's a miracle that we can survive with that. But let's look at Agenda 2063, the vision. Every country has a vision. And surprisingly, when people don't realize within East Africa community, the countries which are there, we have got East African Community Vision 2050. To what extent have we taken all this into consideration in our thinking? As a key means of achieving sustainable public finance, then public sector entities across the world need an efficient financial reporting framework. And that's what we've been discussing in the course of the week. What is our reporting framework? What few things we need to do? So the adoption of a financial reporting framework by governments, we said across Africa, we are using the International Public Sector Accounting Standards. It's a giant step towards achieving transparency and accountability in the public sector, but effective public finance management is key to realizing Africa Agenda 2063 and the SDGs. This requires the commitment and support of all key stakeholders. And today, we are happy to say that we have increased the knowledge base, we have increased the number of stakeholders in realizing the Agenda 2063 and the SDGs in the world. So the PFMR reforms, we have been talking about a number of reforms, that the objective of our public finance management reforms is centered on, among other functions, enhancing transparency in governance, increasing prudential allocation of financial capital. Gashawa was talking about that allocation of resources, accountability in financial management, which Mr. Ngote has been talking about, and separating policy and management functions. We had those issues in terms of audit, in terms of risk management. How do we ensure that we put all this into perspective as we go through the implementation of the public finance management objectives? So the public finance management reform seeks to ensure fiscal efficiency. And this is very key because when we talk about the fiscal efficiency, we are looking at the element of the resource envelopes, which you discussed, and being able to look at our physical space, release resources necessary to achieve specific goals. And that's what you see in every country. Everybody here in Kenya understands that there is no budgeting without mentioning the Big Four agenda. If you don't mention it, what happens? There are no resources. That's a reality. So how do we link that and create that space for our resources and ensure efficiency and discipline in the use of those public finances, and therefore enhancing public service efficiency and safeguarding the available resources to be used in the best interest of our citizens? And the main challenges we have seen, and this one, some of them came up yesterday, especially when the county governments were making their presentation. And we saw it also from the country cases, that the main challenges are in areas of prioritization. Do we get our priorities right? How do we ensure that we are actually putting resources into high impact areas? And that's why we're talking about the issue of revenue or mobilization and the impact on the economy. The budgets we were showing on the first day, we are having increasing budgets every year in the countries, in the organizations, but are those budgets having an impact in the economic growth of our countries or the impact in the growth of our organizations? It doesn't make sense increasing the budget without having outputs and outcomes. And that's very important. Priorities, fund disbursement, big issues, especially the relationship between national and subnational agencies. The national agencies are a bit slow to disburse funds, and this is a big issue, not only in Kenya, but we have seen the funds flow processes. The funds flow processes need to be enhanced. Budget execution, the procurement processes. Mr. Mondi was with you here discussing about the old procurement processes, because out of personnel emolument, all our budgets are executed through what? Procurement. If you look at your entire budget, you remove personnel emoluments, whatever is left requires what? A procurement process. So in that procurement process, then what are we looking at and how do we want to realize that? Operational inefficiencies, unnecessary wastages, misappropriation of resources, inadequacy of capacity, and basically what? Corruption. Those are big issues that whenever we keep on talking about the public finance management reforms, or whichever decisions you make in your organization at the board level or at the management level or at the operational level, we must rethink of these resources because we are custodian of the public. So how do we entrench the PFM and critical success factors? One is identification of functional PFM priorities. We need to know what are the priority areas and what we need to think about. Synchronizing national and subnational operations to avoid the conflicts which were coming here, that the national agencies are doing this, the subnational agencies are doing the opposite. So how do we synchronize that we are speaking from the same language? How do we do what Dr. Moses was talking about, the conflicts between the national and the subnational agencies, the conflicts where institutions are able to do or be able to implement other institutions' functions? How do we ensure that we separate that? When we talk about physical decentralization, then what comes in mind? How do we manage these aspects? The PFM priorities are wide. When we look at the objectives, we went through the 4 of them in terms of enhancing efficiency and effectiveness, the element of transparency, the element of basically protecting the interests of the citizen. Then we must look at them. Then adequacy of the rollout plans and the sequencing of the reforms. How do we clearly define milestones, the achievements? Some of the systems we have had, and we share experience maybe from Ghana and the rest, they were saying they have a pilot, then you are able to roll out. Then you must check when is the system going to work. Are you going to pilot the system? Are you going to go through a step-by-step approach? Are you going to go through, I know Kenya likes using the big bang in most of the cases. So if things are not working, we don't want to go slow, let's implement it, then we deal with the challenges as we go through the process. So you must decide how do you sequence, how do you roll out whatever you want to do. Adequacy of technical solution, use of technology aligned with institutional reforms, but change in business processes is a bigger challenge. We keep on talking about business process reengineering. I know a lot of discussions involved on how we have documented some of the cases of reengineering. Institutional reengineering is more than ICT. ICT is just an enabler. But how do we have a system which actually reengineers the entire processes and create value? During the presentation of Mr. Angote, he talked about the whole of government approach. We have here in this country what we call basically the Huduma centers, which are basically a platform for bringing government services to one platform. But still that may not have realized some of the key major areas we are suffering from. So we need every institution here to think what kind of reengineering you need to do. I was talking to the health department, I told them it's not the accountant view that the cost of a service in our health institutions is the receipt they give me. But there's more than that. Going to an health unit in this country, you require to be escorted. That person escorting you has lost already man hours. Then when you are there, how many hours do you take? Then all that is the impact on the economy. So when you look at your systems and processes, and Gasha was talking about how long does it take to give a service. If it's a payment, why do you insist people to come and queue at your premises to make payment? I think those are systems we need to change in the current financial technology changes. Realism of short, medium, and long-term plans. How realistic are we? The short-term plans you have, are they actually having tangible outputs? Most of you have been in the government, and we keep on talking even RRI, Rapid Resource Initiative. My 100 days in office, can you be able to account for what was achieved in those 100 days? That's a very short term. The medium term, 3 to 5 years. The long term of the country. Because how we implement those plans would be the actual measure of our impact in the society. Commitment to reform, the supply side or the demand side. We need to really decide, should somebody somewhere push you to take a reform or you see it yourself? We were talking about the structural adjustment programs and even the conditionalities put by for the development partners. Are we doing things because the development partners have said we do it? Or you are doing it because as an institution, you have realized the need to do it? Is it a supply or a demand side? Commitment to reform is very critical. Adequacy of capacity building initiatives, capacity to absorb and then sustain reforms. We need to build our capacity, and I think during this week we have done that, and we need change champions. And I think in PFM, we have been able to get enough people through this conference to go and push the agenda. We talked about the public expenditure and financial accountability and the PFA aspect, looking at the element of budget reliabilities, the element of policy, budget, fiscal strategy and planning, the element of transparency of public finances, the element of management of assets and liabilities, the element of accounting and reporting, predictability and control in budget execution, and also the external scrutiny and audit. All these aspects are what we have been going through. I'm sorry you may not see much of it, but I've highlighted those 7 areas which are there. The budget reliability, the policy-based fiscal strategy and budgeting, transparency of public finances, management of assets and liabilities, accounting and reporting, predictability and control of budget in budget execution, and the element of external scrutiny and audit. I may not want to go, and you will excuse me not to go through that. I try to put all the pillars, but you can see, like now budget reliability, what are we looking at is the aggregate expenditure outturn, the expenditure composition outturn, and the revenue outturn. Those are very key indicators you may want to check at. Transparency of public finances, budget classification, budget documentation, central government operations outside financial reports, transfers to subnational governments, performance information for service delivery, and public access to physical information. All these are developed indicators, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. If we can be able to measure ourselves against established indicators, then we can say truly we have been able to implement the public finance management and able to realize that. So all those indicators are there. Management of assets, physical risk reporting, public investment management, and what I talked about, the PIM, the guidelines and what is there, the economic analysis of investment proposals, investment projection selection, investment project costing, investment project monitoring. Those are heavy areas you discussed in the public investment management, public asset management and debt management issues. That is a pillar which is very critical in management. Policy-based fiscal budgeting, you did it. Macroeconomic and fiscal forecasting. Fiscal strategy, you discussed. Medium-term perspectives, budget preparation process, and legislative scrutiny of budgets. We have got Parliament here in that legislative scrutiny of our budgets and giving us assurance of how the resources have been done that. So allow me to skip that. When you look at budget implementation and reporting, the linkages between budgets, procurement plans, and cash flow projections. Most of us keep on insisting on quarterly returns, annual returns, and proper M&E systems. But the question is, what is in those reports? Does it make sense? Does it communicate? What is the value addition by having a report? So those who are sitting here, what value do we attach to the reports? And is there a linkage? Can I see a clear line of sight from your planning to the procurement to the element of what you report? If that is not clear, then we continue having challenges in terms of execution of our budgets. And that is a great indicator. Most of you, when we ask you, what is the absorption rates of your budgets? You will always complain, and most of you, the main complaint will be procurement. It's not procurement. Did you plan well? because procurement starts from planning. If planning is poor, if cash flow projection is poor, then don't expect to realize your budgets. And that means the budget execution reports will give us very low absorption rates. Every organization here, look at your absorption rates. Most of you, you have 101% absorption of recurrent budget, but you have got less than 50% absorption of what? The development budget. Funds flow challenges, especially those in the national government and the sub-national. We have seen large percentage of development funds transferred in the last 3 months of the financial year. Honestly, that may not assist us. So the whole process must be secured through understanding of the linkages. Supplementary budgets, how many? How many supplementary budgets do you have in Ghana? How many supplementary budgets do you have in Ethiopia, in South Sudan, in Zambia, in Uganda? Sometimes the supplementary budgets may be surprising. In a good budget, we talk about budget credibility. One supplementary budget is enough because you are assessing the whole year and you realize that yes, we need to make adjustment. If you get, you are having 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a time we saw some institutions having up to 6 supplementary budgets. That's not healthy in your planning. So supplementary budgets need to be managed. Pending bills, incurring expenses without necessarily having funds. That's a big issue, increasing, thus affecting the following year budgets. Oversight and governance roles, Office of the Auditor General, audit reports. We need to sit down, understand them, break them down, and give sense to those audit reports. If an auditor is continuously giving a report and you don't look at it, then it doesn't help us. Public Parliamentary Accounts Committee and Parliamentary Investment Committees. Those are oversight bodies within most parliaments in Commonwealth systems. The question is, are those committees having professional inputs or advice? And as we speak here, those who are from those institutions, let's see how we strengthen the advisory role of those committees. Audit committees, a big issue. Some entities, and especially the subnational here in Kenya, have a challenge in coming up with what? Audit committees. They have not been able to put the audit committees in place. Challenges which impede sound PFM. One, planning and budgeting, I've already talked about. Weak linkages between planning and budgeting, especially program-based budgets. And I think during the discussion, there's one participant who raised that linkage. If we are not sincere and more practical in that linkage, then we don't realize the objective. Institutional conflicts. Why do we have conflicts? Why do we have conflicts with the institutions serving the same citizenry? Conflicts between national and subnational agencies, conflicts within the national agencies, conflicts within the subnational agencies. In this country, it's interesting that an agency of government takes another agency of government to court to make a decision. Does that one make sense? Do we have those cases? Sometimes we have seen even departments within one agency take another department to court. You can't agree within the organization. In terms of sharing and utilization of resources, that's a worrying case. Mismanagement of public resources, there has been widespread mismanagement of public resources, and that one you don't need to go far, look at the auditor reports. Huge pending bills, entities accumulating huge pending bills. This affects businesses and disrupts the implementation of planned activities in the subsequent year. Effective internal audit departments and committees is necessary. We talked about that. Delays in submission of financial reports and other mandatory documents. If it's quarterly, if it's monthly, if it's end year, let's submit as per the agreed timelines, because those documents are necessary for decision making. So these are key areas. You may go back and check how well we are doing in our countries, and let's fix them. So in conclusion, I want to say that prudent financial planning at both national and subnational level is critical in fostering macroeconomic stability of the country, and the importance of meaningful sectoral strategies e.g. for health, education, and agriculture sectors, which can feed into the budget what? Prioritization. The issue of scarcity of resources and the need to prioritize is key because the government would not be able to fund all the things in the wish list. You talked about public participation, that is a wish list. Let's move from the wants to the needs and be able to recognize that the resources are very scarce. Then lastly, I need to say, containing expenditures, especially recurrent, wages in particular, while at the same time reallocating towards the key capital expenditure, that's both social and economic, is very critical. And finally, we want to emphasize that fiscal discipline and macroeconomic stability is critical to provide that enabling environment for the private sector to power growth, generate employment, and reduce poverty in our countries. So ladies and gentlemen, we have a responsibility. Thank you so much.
Short. We finish. We hope you are prepared for the evaluation. I am now on autopilot. Andrew, thank you so much. I was just demonstrating that like Andrew and I are known to each other. And the abuse that we normally have in government is I use that to entice him into sin. Let's not in public service look at a relationship we have with people who have positions of responsibility and you want to use it to commit sin. You know, fraudulent things in public service. Our relationship should not be part of what defines our work relations. Our relationship out there, here procedures. Because we need to have governments that are sustainable. Countries have lived without constitutions. Can we do the same? Are you ready? Karibu sana.
Thank you, Van Agot. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure meeting you again this morning. I remember I had wished you safe journey. I didn't remember I was to have another session this morning. And maybe before I start, I want to first of all appreciate that I have seen a very serious group here, and especially considering most of us come from government institutions, seeing us participate in the training from morning to the end, and we have not gone to the beach there to spoil ourselves is really commendable, and I must congratulate you. So yesterday we looked at the subject of inclusivity, citizen engagement, and civic education on PFM. And under that, we looked at policies for inclusivity, we looked at gender responsive budgets, and the rationale and principles of public participation. Remember, these are just highlights. I am not intending to take the time I took yesterday. So looking at inclusivity, we said that this is the practice. Sorry, let me remove this thing. So talking of inclusivity, we said this is a practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized, such as those having physical or mental disabilities or belonging to other minority groups. The understanding here is that people with these kind of characteristics are largely disadvantaged and cannot compete on an equal platform with those people who are fairly well endowed. As such, there is a need to make sure then that these people do not get disadvantaged just because they are not playing at the same level with those who are well endowed. We looked at what we called the forms of exclusion, And remember, our focus is with regard to access to PFM, public financial management information, and so on. So we talked about access exclusion, where information is not availed deliberately or otherwise. So in this case, we have a situation where we have some people who cannot access the information just because that information is not availed to them, and this may be maybe as a deliberate step by some actors for reasons best known to them, or it's just that that information is not available. 2, we looked at codation exclusion, where for reasons of the codation of that particular person, he or she is not able to get PFM information. This could be, for instance, literacy levels, including financial literacy. So if we have somebody who is illiterate, no matter how much you try to explain to them, for instance, about budget, about public finance, about all these matters to do with public finance, it becomes very difficult because of the condition of that particular person. Perhaps this may also be considered when we go for public participation. How do you have an illiterate participate in public financial management discussion? And what kind of input do you expect from them? They may know maybe what they want in terms of infrastructure, but may not be in a very good condition to be able to participate in that public participation forum. 3, we talked about marketing exclusion, PFM information not marketed or disseminated, and this may be related to access exclusion. But in this particular case, we are talking about those who are supposed to disseminate PFM information, not marketing it, or simply not disseminating that particular information. So then we have a situation where some people are excluded just because that information is not marketed. Lastly, we talk about self-exclusion, where, for instance, in response to negative experiences or perceptions, some people just exclude themselves. We have situations, for instance, where somebody says, I'm not interested in public finance. I'm not interested in knowing how budgets are prepared. I'm not interested in knowing how budgets are excluded. You call them for public participation, they say, I'm not interested. You can do what you want, for all I care. So in such cases, those people will be excluded, but that is self-exclusion. So we asked ourselves then, what is public participation? And we said that this is the inclusion of the public in the activities of any organization or project. So if you are in parliament, your activities is passing legislation, and as such, you need to involve individuals or groups in passing that legislation. Same case applies to county assemblies and so on. Public participation, we said, is largely akin to, but more inclusive than stakeholder engagement, and so on. We asked ourselves the question, what is the rationale for public participation? Why do we need public participation? One thing we observed is, as far as our country, Kenya, is concerned, public participation is obligatory, and it's not at the discretion of the parties that are supposed to pass that particular information. This is because public participation has been anchored in our Constitution under Article 201, in Chapter 12 of the Constitution that deals with public finance. Article 201 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 deals with principles of public finance and provides for openness, accountability, and public participation in public financial matters. So public participation then has been anchored in our Constitution. It is not even an act of parliament that maybe some amendments can be made. Of course, even Constitution amendments can be made, but they are much more difficult to make than to amend an act of parliament. So if we find the public demanding public participation, then we know where they are coming from. And I did mention that I teach at Kenyatta University in the Department of Public Policy and Administration. And sometimes you even want to reschedule your class for 1 or 2 reasons, and students tell you, sir, you can't reschedule this class without public participation. And it may look like the student actually is making a simple statement, but from where I start, I know the student is serious. Because you can move that class, let's say from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., and the students doesn't come. And when they are called for some, if at all it warrants a disciplinary whatever action, the student will just come and say, I was not involved in the decision for moving that class because at that particular time I had an appointment with the doctor, at that particular time I had another class, or I'm meeting my girlfriend, and so on and so forth. And there's nothing much we can do. In addition, we need to ensure prudent and responsible use of public resources, responsible financial management, and clear fiscal reporting. Again, please note this is a constitutional provision, I think, at the 5th principle of public finance in Article 201 of the Constitution. So if then the Constitution requires that we have responsible use of public resources, responsible financial management, and clear fiscal reporting, then public participation must be there. It's not an option. Looking at the principle of public participation, we said the key principle of public participation is that those who are affected by a decision have a right to be involved in the decision-making process. We did look at instances where we have projects that are financed by the government, projects that are financed by development partners, and so on. And we did review, or maybe mention that, for instance, where you have a project financed by World Bank, one of the key conditions is that the people affected, a project affected individuals must be consulted. And we observed that if you consult those people, for instance, those people may say they don't want the project. They don't want the project in that place, or they don't want the project in the form in which you want it done. Or they may suggest better ways of implementing that particular project. Or they may suggest that the project be done in future, and so on and so forth. So since they are affected, then we are saying it is only fair that those people are consulted. As such, public participation suggests that the public's contribution will influence the decision. We looked at what we refer to as gender-inclusive budgets, and also reminded ourselves that the thinking of most people is that when you talk about gender, it's about women. Whereas we know that men, we have a gender called male and a gender called female, but we decided to leave that discussion maybe for the next forum. However, we said gender-responsive budgeting is an emerging policy discourse which seeks to reorient public resource allocation by advocating for substantial role of women in decision-making on important issues, as well as ensuring equity with regard to distribution of resources between women and men. So the key issue here with regard to gender-responsive budget is to ask ourselves, how can gender issues, and especially women issues, be factored in the budget? And who then should be responsible for that? And if you want to advocate women issues and want them captured in the budget, at what point in the budget process then should you be able to come in? Is it at the point of budget formulation? Is it at the point of budget execution? Or is it at the point where, is it a point of budget preparation? Is it at the point of budget execution? Or is it at the point of budget implementation? Is it at the point of doing impact assessment on the budget and so on? So these are issues that will need to be looked at more closely. Lastly, we looked at citizen engagement and civic education on PFM. What is the role of individuals? That was omitted in the slide, but it was deliberate for us to be able to discuss the role of individuals. How can I be able to participate in PFM? How can I be able to engage in public financial matters, civic education, public participation as an individual? Or simply, how can I be able to engage as an individual when it comes to PFM? We said a number of approaches can be used. We talked about the issue of whistleblowers. We can participate as whistleblowers. We can participate in these public participation forums and a number of other ways. But we can also be able to engage individually by lobbying to our members of parliament and other parties involved. But more so, more structured approaches is where we have civil societies, and a discussion arose as to how these civil societies perform. We had some contribution from our friends, participants from Zambia, where it was observed that civil societies in Zambia are largely politically oriented, so that when a civil society leader stands, what we find them talking about is about their political orientation. We didn't find significant variation, or maybe, although we didn't look at it statistically, but we imagined that the variation between what happens in Zambia and what happens in Kenya may not necessarily be statistically significant. What that means is that we have quite some similarities between what happens in those, in a number of African countries in the region. However, we cannot underestimate the role of the civil society when it comes to civic education on PFM. Civil society comprises of the actors involved there, and we said these groups have a critical role in monitoring the implementation of the national, county government, and county government levels of citizen-based monitoring. So we looked at the involvement of these civil societies at budget preparation and allocation, budget disbursements, implementation of programs and projects, and the impact assessment of implemented projects on the target groups. With regard to budget preparation, Agote, I hope I'm not taking too much of your time. How much? Timekeeper, I don't know whether he resigned. She resigned. By now she would have flagged me. So those issues I've just mentioned, you can review them because they're already in the slides. And lastly, we had the food for thought, where we looked at citizen involvement with regard to the equalization fund and how that equalization fund should be distributed. What should then be our contribution? Because how it should be distributed is not really clearly mapped in the Constitution. Two, we looked at the spirit versus the letter of public participation, where it was expected that the public, under the Constitution, it was expected that the public would, the input of the public would be factored in. But what we find is that in practice that citizens just, the leaders of public participation forums want to just pick our signatures and they go. In other words, we find no evidence of properly structured public participation activities. And we did appreciate that the Senate and the Attorney General have attempted to develop a framework that will largely guide us in future events. Lastly, civic education and financial literacy or lack of it. We asked the question, what if Euroboard was eaten? What is Euroboard? That was the homework given yesterday. I hope you'll be able to submit your assignment for marking before you get the certificate, Agote. I should mark that, right? I had 2 presentations, so that was the first presentation. So I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to. There was one in the morning and another one in the afternoon. So, so thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you the best.
We were talking about in public investment management. There are only 3 things. I'm not going to make that presentation. For public investments, know that the greatest amount of public resources go into public investments. For us as public service managers and administrators, we have a responsibility of ensuring value for money. We pointed out that in public investments, we have challenges of politics. We have the challenge of corruption. So for us as public managers, we need to look at how to manage the politics and how to prevent and combat corruption in public investments. It's critical for us as implementers of those investments to plan for sustainability. And we then agreed one of the requirements for governments is to develop guidelines. That is the summary on public investments. Ladies and gentlemen, you may have questions, but allow me to invite some officers here. Before we do evaluation and before you make comments after the evaluation, I want to invite Julie. Julie works at the APAM Secretariat. She is a program officer. By the way, the Kenya government and APAM have an MOU. The Kenya government has undertaken to house APAM offices in Africa. They are in Gigiri. Julie is the program officer. In the APAM constitution, no Kenyan can be a secretary general. So the secretary generals come from outside. Dr. Scott is from Ghana. I know APAM asked him to stay on so that they could mentor, because the fellow she's talking over from went back to government. So I want her to come and tell us something about APAM and how we need to register and what type of programs they run and conferences. We have normally roundtable conferences across Africa. Now APAM has chapters. So the Kenyan chapter, I'll also invite Alima. Alima to come and talk about the Kenyan chapter, and Julie to come and talk about APAM, our mother organization. I will give each one of them 5 minutes, then we go to evaluation, and if you have evaluation, we would allow you to also give questions, verbal, on what we presented and the whole program. So Julie, can I invite you? Alima Sugo is a staff of the Kenya School of Government, but seconded to the CAPAM, Kenya Association for Public Administration and Management, while Julie is in our mother organization, the APAM. Both of them are my mentees. I am a mentor to them. Munipe makofi.
Thank you, Mr. Angote, for that introduction. Yes, I look up to Mr. Angote. He has been my mentor. You don't find very many in this industry to mentor us, but he has held our hands. We joined the association when we were very young, and he has been able to mentor us until this stage, and for that, we thank him so much. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to day 5 of the PFM seminar. Thank you for joining us this far. We hope you've had an interactive and a good time with us. So I'd like to just briefly tell you about APAM, our programs, our membership arrangements, and our leadership structure, and the 2021 programs to maybe look out for this year if all things go well. So as we have given you some organizational profiles, I hope everyone has received a copy, and if you don't have, we have extra copies that you can just grab over here, organizational profiles for APAM that detail most of our programs and activities. So in summary, I would just like to go through the historical background of APAM. This organization was formed in early 1970s. It was as a result of meetings of cabinet secretaries who met together and found a reason to come together as heads of public service to share their experiences with their counterparts in the African continent. And this is what brought about APAM. It was an organization set to be a networking platform to bring public servants together, to share experiences, to initiate research with the basic aim of enhancing service delivery in the African continent. And this is what gave rise to the African Association for Public Administration and Management. Since the African Association for Public Administration and Management is a continental body, we have our local chapters which are located in multiple African countries and which we use to reach to the African countries in a local context. As Mr. Angote has said, we have the Kenyan chapter here, housed at the Kenya School of Government with Halima as a program officer. We also have different national chapters in countries such as Ethiopia. We are finalizing the agreement with the Ethiopian. It's called the Ethiopian Association for Public Administration and Management. We have chapters in Zambia under the National Institute of Public Administration and Management in Zambia. In Ghana, we work with the GIMPA, the Ghana Institute of Public Administration in Ghana, and many, many other African institutes. So we consider all the 54 African countries as our members and therefore have national chapters in all those countries. So that is a national chapter formation. In terms of membership, our membership is classified into 4 categories. We have the government members, which most of us fall under. We are all part of national governments, so that is the highest level of membership. The second form is the corporate members. We are open to private sector as well because we believe in the synergies and the experiences and lessons learned from the private sector. So our association is open to the private sector and they can join as corporate members. We also have individual members who can join as interested parties in public administration and they can join as individual members. So these are people who are researchers, these are people who are basically interested in public administration and have a stake in public administration. And the last category is the student members. Our organization believes in mentorship of young professionals, and that way we start with them from a young age when they are students. So we go to universities and institutes of public administration and encourage young people to sign up and join the organization, and they can join as students. And for students, we have different mentorship programs for them so that they can consider, first of all, a career in public service, because we do need young people to join public service, and basically give them an overview of how government works and basically to spark their interest in joining government. So those are the 4 categories that we have of APAM membership. Finally, I would like to talk to you about the APAM programs that we have. So we have an array of programs that we conduct on a yearly basis, and this training program is a classic example of the programs that we have. So we have training programs which are mostly specialized meetings that we have delving into specific themes in public administration. Like this week, we were discussing public sector financial management. We also discuss various themes such as anti-corruption, gender mainstreaming, and for us, we like to align all our programs with the continental aspirations in 2063, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals 2030, as well as the National Development Goals enshrined in the Vision 2030, as well as the MTPs and the Big Four agenda. So we try and align all our programs to the continental, the regional, and the international goals. And that way we cascade them to the national levels in our chapters and throughout. So training programs are our number 1 program that we also do. Other programs that we do is applied research. So from these programs that we do, we collect a lot of information. As we have been doing this week, we have gathered your recommendations, your input, your requests to have communiques, and basically policy kind of recommendations that we can share with governments and share with other African governments within the continent. So from that, we derive research areas that we can delve into and come up with a wide array of publications emanating from this research. So I can tell you that from this program, we will try and look into various aspects that have been brought up that are a bit dicey and yet need more information and more people to look into and come up with solutions. So from training programs, we're able to come up with research questions and we're able to delve into them a little bit more. So research is one of the areas. We also have our publications, which are also a culmination of the research programs. We have the referee journal, it's called AJPAM. AJPAM is being sold at the Secretariat desk right outside. You can be able to access the AJPAM publication. We also invite our members to participate and write articles, develop research, and send them to us for publication. So we are inviting you, if you have an area of interest that you would want us to publish, it's an original work, then you can come and we can publish original works of art. So that is basically in the publication and research area field. We also partner with our partners in different African countries, as well as our regional and international partners to embark on research. So very soon we'll be announcing a research on gender that we are conducting, and some gender lists that we are also coming up with. Other program that we do, and I know most of you know this, is the annual conferences that we hold in different African countries. So the APAM Roundtable Conferences is the premier event that is held every year. In 2019, we held the roundtable, the 40th Roundtable Conference in Cairo, Egypt, and this conference was well attended with over 500 delegates from different African countries. So I encourage you, if you have never attended an APAM Roundtable Conference, please do. This is where you see APAM and in all its full facets. There we have the executive, we have all the members of the APAM Executive Committee, as well as the entire leadership, and we have a very robust list of speakers who come and speak to us as the Roundtable Conference. So all things being well, we should have the 41st Roundtable Conference this year in Pretoria, South Africa. So I invite you all in advance to consider joining us in South Africa. All things being well, we shall be in South Africa for the 41st Roundtable Conference. We have also sent you emails of our other publications, our newsletters, organizational profiles, and every other material that we would wish to share with you. So those are the benefits of joining APAM as an organization. You become a member to a professional organization. You will receive membership cards and get opportunity to network with other professionals within the African continent, within your specific fields. We have the different networks which cater for the different facets. We have the Human Resource Network, which addresses human resource concerns. We have the Young Professionals Network, which are responsible for young professionals in public service. It mentors them and teaches them how to conduct themselves in public service. We have academia and practitioners networks, and we have the women network that is enshrined within the APAM structure. So I encourage you to plug into the different networks that we have, and you receive all the benefits from those networks. And finally, I would want to announce the Innovative Management Awards. This program is held so that we can receive innovations from the African countries on what they have been able to come up with in terms of even technology. We have talked a lot about PFM and how technology can come in and kind of aid in this process and re-engineer processes and make processes easier so that we don't have long queues and just make the citizens' service delivery to the citizens more efficient and effective. So we encourage innovations to be sent to us, and we award them based on the relevance and duplication, if they're able to be duplicated and replicated in other African countries. So I encourage you in your departments to foster a conducive environment to increase and encourage innovation in public service. It's not just the private sector which spearheads innovation, even public sector, as we have experienced, and we can attest to it. We have seen innovations coming from the public sector. So in a nutshell, that is what APAM does. And briefly allow me to take you through the programs that we have lined up for 2021, all things being well. So the first program that I will talk about is the African Leaders of Tomorrow program. This program is in partnership with our friends from the Canadian Bureau of International Education and the Institute of Public Administration of Canada. This program started in 2015, and it was a scholarship program which targeted African students. They were taken from the continent and given scholarships in Canadian universities. That was in 2015. And they have since graduated and come back to the African continent. So the program that we are launching from this year, April, is a follow-up to the program that they did in Canada, just to ensure that when they have come back to the African continent, that we're able to harness the skills and the capacities that they learned from the West, and they can be able to integrate them into the African continent. So we invite you to invite your younger colleagues to join us for our 6-month leadership program. This program will be virtual. It will be a purely virtual meeting. We'll have a series of other activities for the young professionals, including podcasts and webinars and research programs that we will just be interacting with young professionals who have recently joined the public service. So this program is basically a mentorship program, and we will talk to a few of us here to just tell us what the ideal African leadership should be like in just mentoring of these younger Africans, because if they are to be the next generation of leaders, then they must have the requisite skills and mentalities to allow them to take in that space. So I encourage you to invite them to take part in this project for 2021. Again, this is a purely virtual meeting. In July this year, we are planning on having an anti-corruption conference in Nairobi, Kenya, all things being well. So we will give more details on that, the anti-corruption conference. We also have planned a stakeholders meeting in public policy, and this will be mostly targeting the schools of public administration and the stakeholders of public policy and public administration. So we will have this meeting in July. It will be a virtual meeting. It will be held with our partners at the National Association for Public Administration and Management, NASPA, which is in the United States. So this will be a virtual forum, and all of us are invited to this. In August 2021, we are also planning to have a transparency and accountability seminar in Uganda. Again, all things being well. So this program will delve into transparency and accountability, ethics, and we're hoping to have this with our partners at the Uganda Institute of Management. In September, we are going to have a series of public lectures. For public lectures, we work with universities. Within Kenya, we work with the Kenyatta University and the University of Nairobi. So we have one-day lectures which we open them for students to come and interact with experts in different fields. 2019, we had a public lecture at the Kenyatta University, and we're hoping to roll out a series of lectures in September at the University of Nairobi, Kenyatta University, and in Tanzania at the Mzumbe University in Dar es Salaam. We are also planning a Women in Public Service Forum in September 2021. This will also be a physical forum if all things go well. If not, we will have a provision for hybrid kind of calendar that we can either have a physical program or a virtual program. So depending on the situation, we can quickly adopt this into a virtual meeting. So we are planning to have this in September, and it will be hosted in one of our chapters in West Africa. So this is going to be in September. And finally, the Roundtable Conference, as I said earlier, will be held in September, in November in South Africa, Pretoria. So all these details will be available to you. If you have any questions, then we are available to expound more on that. And thank you very much.
Is that by attending the APAM training program, you become part of the data bank. So they'll quite often send you information and invitations. And for those from outside here, depending on how active your branch is, APAM, you'll be saying, why is this thing not held in our country? It depends on how active your branch is. They became active in Kenya here. I was for the last, up to 2019, the focal point person, because the Ministry for Public Service is the focal point for APAM activities. So we generate a lot of networks with them. We appeal to you, when you go back to your country chapters, that the more active they are. Like Zambia, we postponed an APAM training program in Livingstone last year because of COVID. Last year there was a joint program between APAM and UMI, the Uganda Management Institute. So they work with the country chapters. The more active you are, they'll have a presence. We had a very active branch in Tanzania for a long time because the founding Secretary General of the APAM was Professor Kehaze Mutahaba. In Tanzania was very active. That's why you hear them talking about the IDM, the former IDM Mzumbe, the Mzumbe University, working with them. So you are members of APAM by attending the training programs. They'll continue inviting you. And when they invite those of you from ministries to attend conferences and there is a doubt, the Ministry for Public Service will normally send out a circular inviting you to their roundtable conferences, which you use as a document for seeking for release by your PSs. We have had innovation awards. The APAM Kenya has been a winner a number of times. We also have the issue of the innovations that the ministry writes to ask you to submit innovations. Ambassador Mudawara is one of the few persons who have won the award. Alima, 5 minutes. Not as long as this one here. Halima is the focal point person for the Kenyan chapter, KAPAM, Kenya Association for Public Administration and Management. So that we finish the evaluation, we break briefly, then we have the closing ceremony. Clifford, wherever you are.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Halima Aden. I work at the Kenya School of Government as a senior administrative officer, and I'm also seconded to the office of the Kenya Association for Public Administration and Management. That is basically, I'll make it easier for you. That is the Kenyan chapter of APAM. APAM is like the mother body, and then we have the babies. We have the Tanzania chapter, Uganda chapter, and all these other national chapters. So I'm the program officer for the KAPAM, chapter, and the Director General for Kenya School of Government. I work under him. He's the Executive Secretary. So I joined the KAPAM office in the year 2013. So I've been conducting activities. I have a calendar of activities every year, about 3, 4, 5 activities. We do a few collaborations with APAM. So when, for example, this program is a public sector financial management, is a program for Kenya School of Government in collaboration with APAM. So the KAPAM chapter comes in as the host, basically. Because I'm in the I'm the program officer. So the association basically was formed in the year 2007, and it was formed in the year 2007 or 7th December, basically. Now the people I'm addressing are the Kenyans. If you want to become a member of KAPAM, I'll send you. I have taken your emails. I'll send you the procedure on email. You're going to get a membership certificate, and from there you're going to have access to all the calendar of activities for KAPAM and all the communication that comes from APAM in terms of the annual communique, the reports, their newsletters. They usually share that with me, but being a KAPAM member, I can also share that information with you. Basically, for mine was brief, and if you want to become a KAPAM member, I'll email you a procedure, and I'll also give you my phone number. That's for the Kenyan members. For this year's activities, the next activity for the Kenyan chapter will be the 2021 KAPAM annual conference. Hopefully this will be in April. The exact dates have not yet been communicated, but I'll be able to share that with you. We're planning to have a conference and talk about issues of COVID-19 and how the productivity of the public service has been affected by this pandemic, and how we can basically sustainability and how we can get over this pandemic and have better performance. And another event that we're probably planning to hold is a synergy in public service. We're going to hold that in September in Naivasha. Naivasha is basically a town here in Nairobi, for those who don't, a town here in Kenya. And we are also going to be able to attend the annual roundtable, the 41st annual roundtable conference for APAM. So I'll be able to invite you for some of those activities, but I'll share with you the calendar. And I think basically, Mr. Angote, that is it.
So when we confirm the conference date, invitations should be extended to us as a chapter. We are looking forward to actually having people elect officials so that you have a vibrant branch with its own secretariat. There are issues that came up in a workshop we had in Kisumu that was raised. Those of you who are here and were in Kisumu might think nobody took it up. That's where we're moving towards. That's why we need to have a conference so that people then move towards having their own leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, I now want to invite Julian Clifford to lead us through the process of evaluation. And thereafter, we shall have a brief break. Then we reconvene for the award of certificates, a closing ceremony. Daktari, you and I can now vacate. We can vacate and leave for them now.
Thank you, Mr. Angote. Once again, I would like to point your attention to our survey. So this survey has already been sent to you via email. If you haven't received it yet, kindly let us know that we should send it to you again. It is also available on the APAM website. So kindly ensure that you have this link to the survey. So this survey aims to ensure that the program meets its obligations, and this is why we do the monitoring and evaluation of the program. So this is the survey in a brief outlook. So it starts with gender. We want to evaluate what gender diversity we have and what gender we received for our training programs. So this is the first facet that you will get. The second one is country of residence. We want to know which country we are representing. So this is the country of residence. Third, we want to know our communication channels and how effective they are in ensuring that you get the proper communication in a timely way. So please let us know how you are able to learn about our program. We also would like you to rank what influenced you in choosing to attend this particular conference. Is it the topic that influenced your decision to attend, or is it your networking opportunities that are likely to be gotten from this seminar? So we would want to know what influenced your decision to join us. This is the overall evaluation of the program. We want to receive your sincere feedback so that we can improve ourselves and be able to make our programs better. So in this section is the overall evaluation, talk about internet or connectivity and time allocated for presentations, and that there was adequate choice in topics, the structure of the program and method of delivery was effective. So kindly give us your response to that. Number 6, we ask you how you will change your practice as a result of attending this training program. So from here, we want to evaluate your learning experience and what you're able to pick from this program and how you are going to utilize it going forward. So is it that we're going to have, you're revising your protocols, policies, or procedures in PFM? What have you picked? What lesson have you picked from either Zambia or Ghana that you will want to implement in your own organization? So number 7, we want to know, has this training program met your identified needs and your professional gaps? Number 8, what areas you would like to see improved in a general sense? You can just give us your feedback on that. And then we would also want to hear your suggested topics, what you would want us to see addressed, and which kind of engagement you'd want to have with us. We have already given you the outlook of the 2021 programs, but if there are other areas of concern that you have, this is the opportunity to engage with us. Number 10, the last question, do you consider 5 days adequate for the training program? You can let us know what your input is on that. Thank you very much. We hope to get all your feedback before we leave Mombasa. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's about 11:20, so we shall promptly head over for tea break, and then when we come back, we'll have the closing ceremony. So enjoy your tea break. Thank you.